everyone. Right. Before we get started, thank you so much for joining us for this live podcast recording of EDUCAUSE Jam Talk. Today we're going to be discussing the Swiss Army knife of cybersecurity and privacy awareness. So we'll have a conversation with our guests here today, and then you will be posting this online as part of the EDUCAUSE Shop Talk series. So thank you all for joining us at the EDUCAUSE Cybersecurity and Privacy Professionals Conference. I'm Sophie White, and I'm a content marketing and program manager at EDUCAUSE and one of the hosts for today's discussion.
And I'm Jenay Rivera, a senior researcher at EDUCAUSE, and I'm your co-host.
And we're so excited to have two guests with us today. We have Wendy Gaddles, Yale University Cybersecurity Awareness Advisor, and Ben Woelk, Rochester Institute of Technology Governance, Awareness, and Training Manager with us. So I'll introduce Wendy and Ben, and then we'll jump into it. Wendy Battles is the Cybersecurity Awareness Advisor for Yale's Information Security Office, where she leads engaging awareness campaigns, training, and communications that help faculty, staff, and students build safe cyber habits. She transforms complex cybersecurity topics into approachable, actionable guidance for the Yale community. Wendy's also the co-host of Yale's Be Cyber Fit podcast, that's BEE, Cyber Fit, where she helps make cybersecurity relatable and accessible. Thank you so much for joining us, Wendy. And I know that you also host your own podcast on the side outside of Yale, so we're really excited to have you today to chat about cybersecurity awareness.
Excited to be here.
Ben Woelk is a CISSP, CPTC, and the Governance Awareness and Training Manager for the Information Security Office at Rochester Institute of Technology, where he's developed a leading information security awareness program. Ben is a member and former co-chair of the EDUCAUSE Internet 2 Security Awareness and Training Group of the Higher Education Information Security Council. He's also a fellow and past president of the Society for Technical Communication and an adjunct faculty at RIT, teaching classroom and online courses in cybersecurity policy and law, technical communication, and introverts and leadership. Thanks for being with us, Ben.
Thanks, I appreciate the opportunity.
And I think you also have a podcast called Hope for the Introvert, is that right?
That's correct. Not actively recording right now, but there are 30 plus episodes available on all the major podcast platforms.
And 30 is plenty for an introvert, right?
Yeah, but it's an interesting format because the idea of the idea of doing a podcast as an introvert is absolutely terrifying. But when you have a guest who in a conversation, it just really flows well. Absolutely, that's this bullshit.
Love it. It's very meta. We could talk about podcasting on the podcast. But no, I love that. And thank you for sharing that too, because I think this topic, cybersecurity awareness training, we could talk so much about things like communication strategies and social media and all these things that, I think tend to be associated more with extroversion. And I think it's really important to think about how we can all bring our own skills and personalities to this kind of work. I know that anyone at this conference, there's also a social media marketing conference that has been happening in Anaheim this week. And I walked in the first day after getting off the plane and saw this massive group of people who were at that conference and so loud, and I immediately ran away. They didn't my first. So I feel like social media can get kind of that rap, but it also, communications could be a really thoughtful way to intentionally train on cybersecurity and privacy awareness too.
Yeah, so, that's a good said, right? We should take it for running. That's great. That's a good segue into thinking about creative leveraging of communications for raising awareness. What are some of the most recent dates that are top of mind for you, or things you're trying out? Fun stories, fun facts around that?
Fun stories? Yeah, that's very good, yeah. You can start. It's, I guess, be a wartime thing.
Sure. I would say that we're always trying to be innovative at Yale in how we engage our community because we all are so overwhelmed with information
coming at us from every direction, from email to Slack or Teams to our personal phones, all the things throughout the day. So I feel like it's very hard to get people's attention just to build awareness about things that are important, let alone trying to encourage people to change their behavior to be more cyber safe. So we're always trying to figure out new ways to do that. And a few years ago, we introduced this idea of ULA, our cyber bee, which is both a graphic, and people know Bula has like a different posters. ULA has special, is designed for different campaigns with different things. So sometimes we're doing campaign ULA might be on a lotus to be, because Bula is thinking about relaxing before responding to a phishing email. So we got really creative in using Woelk, and now people really recognize Woelk on campus. They're like, "Oh, you're the bee Woelk." When I run into people, because we teach a lot of webinars and things like that, where I can't necessarily see it, but they could see me, Coco's tea something. So that's become sort of part of what we do. It's recognizable and memorable, and over time you increased a monthly tip with Bula, our newsletter, our podcast. But recently, something we've done that's different and new is that we decided to introduce a video series. So we wanted to sort of animate Bula, and wanted to do it in, again, short ways. Attention is so short. You have like a few seconds to grab people's attention before they move on to the next thing. So we do, I would say 90-second to 2 videos with Bula about key cybersecurity topics, things they want to know about, so the things that people can't do. So always kind of seeing that with behavior change, but in a subtle way that grabs people's attention. And so we work with our internal team, our pretty publishing team that produces the video scores, and that's been really fantastic. It's just a fresh take on things, because I think that sometimes when we do the same thing again and again, it gets stale, and we can't always expect people to act on that or to pay attention to that. So we'll always try to find a little something different to grab people's attention in a way we can be really engaging, that will hopefully broaden their thinking about cybersecurity awareness and their own behaviors. So that's really.
We gain nothing. No, no. It's funny though, because there is always that push to be innovative, creative, and to get people's attention for more than 5 seconds is really, really art. But I think there's a larger context around it in terms of that we're trying to change culture, and that doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen with 1 or 2 innovations for things like that. So it's not necessarily telling everyone the exact same thing the exact same way all the time, but there does need a consistent messaging over time. So we focus on that. Interestingly, we do. Yin mentioned the Julia has a costume and everything, and may walk around and you get people to wear your student orders, which is a little trickier. We have a fish costume. It's actually, I think it's supposed to be a bass. It's this kind of hulking fish costume, and I was going to say part of our student review program in terms of behavior doing those, don't really try to see will they fit the costume, but no, it's kind of there in the background. But there also needs to be a willingness to, I think, be silly. And honestly, you don't lose in the costume most of the time anyway. But it's interesting with, trying to change culture. And I try to look at this as strategically as what can we accomplish over time. The tricky part is what have we accomplished over time and how do we measure that? And I think that's going to be a bit of the struggle.
Are you measuring it at all? I know that's a tricky question, but how do you evaluate, in some sense, the success of your campaigns?
So
that is a question, and it's hard. I think that measuring awareness effectiveness is very difficult, and we're always struggling with that. There's only so many quantitative measures to kind of figure out effectiveness. And, you know, there's such a debate even about, even if you do phishing simulations, if we don't even do at Yale, there, you know, there's two sides to that story. Some people say that you can do them all you want, but when it comes to an actual email, it doesn't necessarily mean people will click on it. So I think that for all of us, it's a struggle to figure out like how will we best measure the effectiveness of our programs. We put a lot of effort into things. We try to be strategic, but we also want to feel like there's some payoff for this and things are shifting. So I would say that, you know, we measure quantitatively in terms of, you know, how many people have registered for campaigns that were today. What is the participation in different webinars or events that we're having? Can we see that difference over time, and is it growing? I mean, it still doesn't tell you how engaged people are. It still doesn't tell you, well, okay, they came to a webinar, we did that change things. But I think we also then use qualitative information to help us. And one thing I happened to look at my email this morning at like 6 in the morning, right? You know, it's 9 o'clock back east. And it was someone who had come to a webinar that we've done. We just did this great, you know, short campaign called Protected Because It's All Connected, which was just all about this idea that, you know, whether it's at Yale or at home, all of our information is really connected. And that we have to really be thinking strategically about how we protect ourselves in both places. So she said she come to some different webinars, and she said, I have to tell you that my mother, who is older, had gotten into some trouble and someone had scammed her and she lost a bunch of money, but she said that she came to this workshop and she learned so much. And she was able to go home and share that with her mother. And together they really kind of talked through what happened, and it wasn't going to bring back the thousands of dollars she lost. Luckily, it wasn't like her whole life savings, but we've all heard stories or we know people and we know the impact of this. But I thought it was really interesting that she was so grateful to gain this information and to literally apply it right away, to be able to have conversations, to know what to even say to her lover, to start that dialogue so that they could prevent that from happening again. And in a way that was not threatening, not like, I can't believe you did this wrong, but, you know, you have to meet people where they are. So to be able to like have this very compassionate conversation with her mother who feels so bad and ashamed about what happened and embarrassed. And so I thought that was just that's just an example of how we try to collect information qualitatively that help us also understand the sometimes detracted hat of the work that we do. So creative.
Yeah, and I think, you know, with that messaging, I mean, you talk about it being relevant to your mother. Dad wasn't retired always, but we're looking at, we've always tried to give our community information that helps them stay safe and helps them help others stay safe as well. So there's been kind of stronger focus on these are the things that you can do that are gonna, I didn't use cyber hygiene as a term or anything like that, but it's what are those key things that they could be doing? They're not big on coming down on the compliance side. You have to do this because such and such. And a lot of what we've done really is it's interesting. So there's a lot of building relationships, and that may not seem to make sense on a mass communication basis, but there is always we want to be available as a resource. We're very consultative with staff, faculty, when looking at faculty to remember we're there. But we also try to be helpful. We try not to be the office of no. And I know when you're at cybersecurity, the assumption is that is what you're there to do, is tell people what they cannot do or take away something that they want to do. So we've really focused on, okay, yes, you want to do that, how can we help you do that securely in a way that's going to protect whether it's privacy or confidentiality or any of those things.
That's so true. We're talking about this idea of culture change that takes time, and try to transition from the office of NO to the office of K at OW. And I always feel like that's a work in progress and trying to build these relationships and speaking in different ways. One more thing I do want to mention, you mentioned that first question, like, what do you do that's fun? And I just remember that it both kind of combines something that's fun and engaging, but also helps us with metrics. And that's that we started a Viva Engage channel. So for anyone who has a Microsoft shop, you know, Viva Engage used to be Yammer, which was this application used like, I don't know, back in the 20 teens. And they're just, and we're not sort of a social media kind of organization where people are, it's that, but basically it's an app with the Microsoft suite. And it's sort of like social media for, you know, whatever you might be doing. We have it for different groups at Gale. And so we said, well, what if we started this Viva Engage channel, but was branding with RB Bula. So it's called The Hive, because it's what the Hive, Yale Cyber Buzz. And that has been a fantastic way for us to engage the community. It's a different way to communicate. It's a different channel since, of course, you know, people are busy. People can become members, they can join, and they get notifications so they could, you know, see when we've posted, whether it's daily or it's weekly. But one of the things I love about that is that there are fantastic metrics that we can glean, because it's always so hard to measure this, but you can measure engagement, you know, how many people are engaged over a period of time, etc. So that's been really helpful for us to be able to have something very specific. So we have goals for, you know, how we want to increase it by a certain number of members. And my goal when I started, I thought, oh, we need to get 300 members to a Cybersecurity Wellness Month. Because I thought it'd be so easy if people would just join, and we did all this publicizing, but of course, you know, people are busy, you know, living their lives and doing work. And I think again, the month I did 150, so I still kind of was pretty good for like half my goal, and we're still working on it, but I think that's just another tool. Always think about you, we all have money, and I know budgets are tight these days, so how can we get creative with limited resources to engage people and also measure things? And that's a really great way for us to do that.
I think another part of this is because we don't have unlimited funds or highway staffing, we're also risk managers. So it's not a case of we just need an awareness program. We have to see which groups are going to be targeted. What can we do for those specific groups? And it's been really interesting because it varies year to year in general. It's like, okay, the students aren't high risk to the university, but wait a minute, they're being targeted. And now accounts are getting compromised and they're putting in refund requests. The attackers are putting in refund requests for tuition. And it was, you know, how do we approach that? Because you've got many stakeholders, which, as you can imagine, is really difficult to get consistent messaging when you've got 8 or 9 different people who want to deter and what to say with it. But it ended up being a combination of we're going to have communication around it. We also have to get specific technical controls in place. So I'm kind of in this governance, policy, training, development, awareness space. So I'm not doing anywhere near the amount of awareness I'd like to be doing. But it does get me into a space where I can look at policy. Do we need to change things there? What are the different things around messaging? But in terms of higher risk places, we have done specific campaign things for like our controller's office or our, what's called the university advancement at this point in time, because they're targeted. They have access to financial information or finances. And doing campaign type things for them, limited time, not forever, but doing limited campaign type things and meeting with them and explaining value and talking to them has really been helpful, because I do think they look at us more as a partner in helping the university again, and rather than, so you can do that.
Yeah, I really love that take. You've heard so much at this conference about risk assessment, and I think you've heard about maybe putting controls on specific really sensitive data, or thinking about how to separate systems, federate data so different people have access. But I hadn't heard about it in relation to the awareness space of how do we actually do risk assessments in terms of our communications. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, and it really feels but for both of you, your awareness efforts are integrated and diversified in very interesting ways. it seems like something that's being done effectively. It needs to be happening from different angles and different modalities at different times. Can you talk about that approach?
Yeah, I think you're so right that it's a multi-layered approach to reach people. I will that one of the things that we learn when we go to take CS courses, they have a course about creating cybersecurity awareness program. And one of the things they talk a lot about is the top-down approach, that you always have to have support from the top for what you're doing, which is really anything we're doing, whether it's around cybersecurity or in entropic organizations. And that is really important, but I think an effective program has different approaches to reach people, and yes, top-down is important, but we also know that not every leader is as invested. All our leaders are going to be busy like all of us are, so getting their attention is difficult. Sometimes in case an incident or something happening, or it's often, something happens at a pure organization that a light bulb goes on for us, and we're like, oh my goodness, they've had this problem, and we want to try to prevent that problem, so that can motivate us. So yes, the top data is important. So for example, we, got people into our past purpose program with EDUCAUSE in the Office of Development and in finance based on things that have happened in other places. And that was an imperative, and those leaders were all bought in on that. But that can't be the only strategy, because not every leader, they might think it's important, but a lot of things are important, and then there are other things that are urgent and important, and that's where their attention is going. So we could talk what we want, but it doesn't necessarily mean we can motivate them to, raise that as the priority list. It probably needs to be up there pressing. So I think we also have this bottom-up approach, this grassroots approach, and sort of middle approach. So the grassroots approach, part of that is using the high at Viva Engage to try to engage people and to get people to, to come to our webinars. And one thing we've done that's been really creative is that we've partnered with Harvard to do a series of webinars. In fact, Fred Ben, who's presenting today, has also been, is one of the facilitators at some of our webinars. But we've tried to find creative ways to take the limited resources we have and engage a larger group of people. So by doing this joint endeavor, we've gotten more people to come, new people that hadn't been part of our program. And maybe having a tech and an event we've done would then become part of our list, that we then email and encouraging you to join our mailing list for upcoming events. So it's sort of that creative approach to get people to engage with us that I think has been helpful. So show top down and sort of bottom up.
And it sounds like stakeholders, engaging with stakeholders across the institution and also outside of the institution to partner as a field as well.
So I think it's interesting because we all have a lot of constraints, right? Whether it's staffing, funds, tend to tie right together for some reason. But it's tricky because we rely heavily on student voice, and we always have a full position in our office, which is a non-technical cybersecurity position. So I'm, typically looking for communication students who can understand technical and contextualize and explain it for the community. But we also tend to rely on what their specialties are. We had a student who's absolutely brilliant on the social media side, loved doing a bunch of little short clips, wearing a fish costume, would be doing ridiculous things, and really I think he was increasing the social media follow. The tricky part is that the next semester we have much thicker priorities of things we have to get done, and then something start dwindling, and we have to figure out how to kind of build things back up. But one thing I wanted to mention, we absolutely have the don't waste the crisis part of it. But it's interesting because we're really trying to build that culture so we don't have as many crises. But again, if something happens, absolutely need to leverage it. But that also makes us reactive and not proactive. So part of, I think, the goal is to figure out that there are a whole bunch of cybersecurity threats that come in. It's always seems to be around phishing, credential compromise, that sort of thing. But recognizing that we've got that wide span of different types of attacks we need to make sure we're talking about that to some degree all the time, and then kind of focusing on we got to do something about this problem. Quick look. It's interesting because we do custom trade because I do have an instructional design background and I understand content, so I can build trade. But we tend to rely on it too much, and as I'm sure all of you know, that if you have an annual training, then the assumption is, well, there's nothing else you need to do because you're going to get in front of them once a year. But one thing that we do add to it is we make absolutely sure that if there have been specific new types of scams, attacks we've seen over the year, they get folded in to the next year's training. So we had a year where we had immigration spams were a big thing. We had students, one of lost almost $10,000 in less than 24 hours. And it was a phish type thing, but it came in over voice. And they knew about phishing, but they did not expect that somebody could come in and, oh, look, it's immigration and customs on my phone. It's got to be, that's what it says. Or it's a financial aid office or something. So we make sure that gets built into the training. And anytime you see something that's different or, a concern, at least you've got the ability to do that. So I feel like it's not enough, but we're customizing to make sure we're getting the right messages out.
That's a really interesting point, and I feel like I'm thinking about the generalist session a bit. I'm curious what you all think, but Mike Horn said we're bad at cybersecurity training as a field in general, and that compliance would be the floor. We should go beyond that. So thinking about that, I'm curious what you two think, but I'm also thinking about, it sounds like, Ben, from your example, you're working with the team that you have and specific capabilities. You have an instructional and design background, you have a student with a social media background. I guess, how do you let employees and staff members kind of use those skills that they're excited about and they have the skills in, but also make sure you have a consistent plan for how, if you don't have a student with a social media background for a particular semester, you're still getting word out about the awareness training?
Yeah, and it's hard because it does have its flow, and we do have different offerings. But I'm terrible in terms of being hands-on manager. So we really do a lot of work in the interview process to make sure we're bringing someone in that can run. And if I'll guide it, that's absolutely great, but please don't ask me every day what you need to do, for specific things. So I think a lot of it's a talent acquisition thing. It's just if we're doing it every semester. And so we do get different advantages. And it's tricky. Our tools that we've had available to us have changed. There's more that I'd love to be doing more on digital signage. We're calling it towards that in the next year. But we had a huge push university-wise, stop sending so much email and email to students particularly. And I suspect the man had what's up week, from the university where they were. So it's like the straight email. It's not always greatly effective, but at least you're sending it out. Is part of the vehicles, but it's not what it used to be in the past. So it's a challenge. I don't think we figured it all out yet. It is interesting because I know one of the top, and maybe that's segue topic-wise a little bit, because you wanted to talk about Gen AI and how we were using it for cybersecurity awareness. Casey Hennig, who was my partner in the pre-conference seminar we did on Tuesday, the pre-conference seminar is all around thinking strategically about awareness, whether it's privacy or cybersecurity or a combination of both. And part of what we do is force people to do the work to figure out who their audience is, which isn't as simple as, it's not going to test students, but really, we've got researching, we've got this audience, that sort of thing, but doing the work to understand what their goals are, what their messaging is, who their audience is, who their candidates partners are, which is a huge part of getting information out there. So we do the work to do that. You're talking about what works with the Gen AI space on that. And part of, Casey did most of the work on this part of it, But part of what we did with that was talk about if you're getting the right prompt engineering in there, talking about what you're doing strategically, we've essentially got a workload that comes out of that pre-conference, which could feed into a GenAI tool. But also what university you're at. And it's been interesting because we found out about research we didn't know were available, putting it into the GenAI tool. So it's been good in terms of kind of helping create a larger picture around what are the different capabilities we have, but it's also been great for ideation. And even things as tried as though we're supposed to put together a table and interactive game thing for a cybersecurity fair, which sounds like a really odd thing, but especially more to say. But the idea is, what are some games? And throwing that into a tool, we'll be getting ideas back on that. You ever can leverage that? Yeah, we'd love to do the whack-a-mole thing. We don't have the whack-a-mole thing to use. But just in terms of new ideas, new ways to do things, I think it's been really helpful to learn of that.
Yeah, your fair made me think about some of the conversations we had around strategic partnerships around campus, because I was thinking about when I used to work on a campus, we had a research fair, and so some of our strategic partners included IRB, for example. The offices of NO sometimes we think it was on us. He did
just in the offices though.
What's his other podcast episode? Tackle IRB at the time. But yeah, I mean, those strategic partnerships are so key to this work. What advice do you have? I mean, we're sitting in front of a room full of cybersecurity privacy professionals, but we also will be sharing this with the broader EDUCAUSE community. And so that's one of the things I think we do best at EDUCAUSE is building some of those bridges and partnerships. So where would you like to see some movement in that regard?
Such a great question. I think that is, I feel like the landscape is right for, even if you already have a bunch of strategic partnerships, continue to build those relationships, looking at departments maybe where you haven't had a chance to make inroads, looking at high risk areas. And you know how it is, there are areas where we buy great relationships with people. And it's just like a home run for both parties. What we've been able to do, like going into departments, as you said earlier, Ben, and doing specific programming, or I'm just trying to understand their specific needs, creating things that really meet their needs in terms of their stack of faculty. So I think that can be such a win. But of course, we all have those areas where we're like, they stunt. Or I haven't had success in that area, what can I do? So I think there are ways that we can even define one or two departments where we haven't been successful, or maybe they have a new leader and beginning to build a relationship with that new leader, just sitting down, have a meeting with them. Say, how can we be of service to you? Here's some of the things that we offer. We'd love to be able to customize based on the needs of your department, with her area. How can we best partner with you? So I think that even sometimes if it's been a go and NO from that leader or that department before, maybe there's someone else in that department, maybe the leader's too busy, maybe we can go to them and say, hey, we'd still love to partner with you. How might we do that? So I think that there are different approaches we can use to even begin to have that kind of conversation with people.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we started our standards process many years ago at this point in terms of our internal policies. We had some really vocal critics from some of the different colleges, and we enrolled them in the process. We invited them in because they had strong views on it, and if you can get them enrolled and you can help build a better product, it makes a big difference. So it's also, I think, helping them understand perspective views on things, whether you agree with that or not. But so much of your work, whether it's awareness or any other aspect, it is bridge building, and it's maintaining those bridges and not assuming everything is okay if you haven't heard from someone in a while. And I'm sure all of us have been in situations where we've worked with people who are very adept at burning bridges, but it's so difficult to rebuild those things. So I think, that focus relationally is part of why culture change takes time too, because people need to know you're going to be consistent. If you, tell them something, that you're going to stand behind it, that you're not just going to flip things around on, or if you do, which sometimes we have to, that you've got your conversation. And, I think to me, open, but it's like building the relationship tier, right? You can see people once a year, maybe once every 5 years, but you can also work on what's these relationships going after this and let's have these regular communications. And it is so helpful to be able to bounce ideas with people at Weir University. And honestly, we do get the very much yes, we're all in the trenches together trying to get this done, but this conference has been phenomenal for making long-term friendships. Well, last side of yours.
I'll add one more thing to this idea of how do we build these bridges. And it's not always the top down because we could do that only so much. But one thing that we've done, we have Viva Engaged posts a couple times a week. We have a post, and we worked on a strategy against the AI to help us think about acting strategically, make sort of a long-term plan about engaging the community. So one of the posts they had recently was, do you have a departmental newsletter in which we could post some of our content periodically? And I was surprised by how many people responded. And some people went to their leaders and then they said, oh yes, we do. And I think that that's a great entree into departments because one of our ambassadors, Leo's on the Cybersecurity Ambassador Program, one of our ambassadors has been asking them for a couple of years, can we please put something in the Cancer Security newsletter? And the answer was always no. Maybe some would John. But if you're persistent and you have the right approach. We got an email recently and she said, oh my gosh, they want us to put something in the newsletter. And so I think that sometimes having that grassroots approach where someone is in the department that maybe is the leader but has some influence or they can, find new ways to approach it and talk to people can be really effective. And so now we've got content going into that newsletter. And I think that's, again, just another approach to kind of get into the department. And then once you kind of get in, there are other ways that you can leverage to kind of expand your reach.
I mean, I can hang on that note of collaboration and that I think to me what I would take from this conversation is that it's a true collaborative effort. It is not, we're going to collaborate by me telling you what you have to do, which we've all been into as collaborative relationships, right? But hearing that this is a true spirit of collaboration, I think it's a free.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm inspired that I think in this age of, we're talking about AI and mythos and all of these really scary things that are coming out of the world, outside of our institutions and trying to attack in, to hear how we can band together as an institution and also as a community to really address those collaboratively is inspiring to me. So thank you both so much for all of the work that you do and for sharing these conversations.